Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have back with me my good friend Alan Peterson. Alan, first of all, welcome back.
Thanks, Tom. It's great to be here.
Turning into an annual affair, Alan.
It is.
We're here to talk about the 2024 MS 150 ride from Houston to College Station. I'm not sure if they still call it Houston to Austin or not, but it's at least the 2024 version.
It is the 2024 version, and it's more complicated than it used to be. It's now, you can go Austin to LaGrange, then LaGrange to College Station, or you could go Houston to LaGrange, then LaGrange to College Station. But you can take a midway start point on either the Houston or the Austin side, do it shorter as long as you like. So the various routes, I think you could ride as little as 100 miles and as many as 200.
Which route are you going to ride?
It depends on the wind. I figured that out the last couple of years. I look at the weather forecast a couple of days ahead of time and make my decision late. Last year, it saved me a lot of trouble. There was a big headwind for the guys coming out of Houston. So I rode out of Austin. We had a little flooding problem near Bastrop State Park, and they bust us around, unfortunately, a bunch of big hills because the roads were closed.
Yeah.
So I was in LaGrange at the fairgrounds by 1 o'clock. There were guys coming from Houston that were in better shape than I was that were arriving at 4:30 and 5 o'clock, and they looked done. They were toast.
How many is it for this year for you?
This will be my 14th ride, including one in Colorado back in 92. So it's, I guess, my 13th Texas MS 150.
And are you still in the 300 Club?
I am.
Tell our listeners what that is.
So this is all a fundraising event, of course, for the National MS Society. It's the way the Texas branch gets about 90% of their funding done in one event. This is, I forgot what I was going to be talking about, the 300 Club. So of the, say, 60 or 6,000 riders, they take the top 300 by funds raised and treat us a little special. So we get improved parking, we get better meals, we get a dedicated shower truck, which is really important since trying to get 6,000 people all cleaned up in one fairgrounds can be a challenge. Let's see what else. Anyway, they treat us nicely. That 300 people, it's a lot of things. The 80-20 rules apply to. That 300 people raise the lion's share of the funding for the event. So 80%-ish of the funding happens from those 300 folks.
The MS is always a very personal event for you. Part of it is because of just you love bike riding.
Yeah.
But there's another part of it. So could you tell us about why MS is so personal to you?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Tom. My mom was diagnosed with MS in the late 80s, early 90s, back when there wasn't anything in the way of treatment. In fact, I read a note by another person that said it was pretty much diagnosed, then pat you on the back and say good luck. There just wasn't. Physical therapy was to keep you as healthy as you could be. But if you had, there were and are several different varieties of MS. But if you had the worst kind, primary progressive, you just were on a steady slope down towards loss of physical function and then eventually dementia and death with MS. What got me excited about doing the ride, excited is perhaps the wrong word. That's what got me interested in supporting the MS Society back in the 90s. And that's what has kept me going since. That connection, the family connection for us has been even more than just doing this for mom. So at various times over the last 13 times that I've done this ride in Texas, my wife has ridden with me on a tandem bicycle. My daughter has gone with me on a single and also on that same tandem. My son-in-law has ridden. My grandson has ridden. This year it'll just be me. The family's busy, but I carry them in spirit with me.
You actually started riding in an MS back in the 90s. Can you tell us about that?
So I was working at a factory in Fountain, Colorado. It was an Apple facility there. And there was a group of 4 or 5 guys and gals that got out and rode the country roads around that factory on lunch period. We had a nice gym facility and cleanup facility. So it was really easy to go get in a nice hour ride and clean up and then get back to work. Someone found something on a bulletin board at a bike shop about the MS 150 ride in Colorado and said, hey, we should do that. And so without much organization or time, we all agreed to do that. And so that ride left Denver and overnighted in Colorado Springs, and then the next day rode to Pueblo. It was on not on I-25 or the service roads, but on the next road over east of there, whose number I forget. But as you can imagine, lots and lots of hills, reasonable amount of traffic, and it wasn't as well policed as the Texas rides that I've done since have been. So it was a fairly hair-raising experience in that regard.
You were telling us before we got started about the different routes. And can you tell us about both routes this year?
Okay. So I'll probably, unless the weather dictates, the wind dictates specifically otherwise, I'll probably ride from Austin. That's what I did last year. And that left just south of the Capitol. So there's some nice selfie opportunities at the start line with the Capitol in the background. That's neat. And runs out east over various two-lane country roads. And we end up in LaGrange Fairgrounds for the overnight. But there's 6 different breakpoints at about 10 to 15 mile intervals. So you stay fed and hydrated all the way with a lunch stop. Just the Bastrop is the lunch stop, as I recall, which was the same going the other direction back when we used to ride Houston to Austin.
What I was gonna ask you, is that same route? So
It
they let you
is,
leave
yes.
from the city of Austin now.
Yes, we used to finish downtown Austin.
Right.
That was your experience. That ended 6 or 7 years ago. We just got to be taking over in the entire city of Austin for all of Sunday, and it was just too much with the construction and growth in Austin. It just didn't work for them anymore. So they first moved us out to the Circuit of the Americas for the finish line out there east of town by the airport out there. And that turned out to not work well for the MS Society. It just didn't have the ambiance and excitement that everybody wanted at the end of the event. And so I believe the first time we tried to end in College Station was 2020, which got canceled for COVID. The first year we were going to actually end up in College Station was 2021. That was a one-day ride because of horrible rains on Saturday. And then overnight, all the roads got flooded and that canceled. Then the last 2 times I've ridden, I've finished in College Station. So that's the second day of that route is LaGrange to College Station. Our lunch stop is at Lake Somerville. It's a beautiful little park out there with a nice tent and a good view of the lake, lots of grass and comfortable spots to lay down and rest one's weary bones, since that's the second day. And then up through Snook and North Zulch and all those exciting places on the west side of the campus, and finish the year before last, we finished actually with a circuit around Kyle Field. Last year they were doing some construction in Kyle Field, and so we couldn't do that. We made a circuit around the outside and then finished on the east side of that stadium.
Could you detail the route from Houston to LaGrange? Is it the same traditional route?
It is, and they have as they had in the past 3 different in-town start points, and then one that they started, I think, for the first time last year, farther west. So you make your way out. So you're familiar with the Waller start
Sure.
line, maybe. So this is another 20 miles west of the Waller start. So
That's pretty far west.
it is, but that ends up being about a 55 mile ride, which is still a substantial bike ride. But if you weren't in the mood for 150 miles, can I sell you on 100 is the mindset I suppose they're going for, just to try to encourage more riders. And I know when you rode, it was probably a lot more folks. I remember one time, maybe in the early 2000s, when we were filling up with 13,000 riders every year. And in fact, you had to sort of race to get registered so you didn't get kicked out. Last year, we actually had 5,400 riders. So substantially smaller than it had been, but fundraising is still really good.
You've got a sheet with some numbers. Can you give us those?
Sure. So last year, like I said, 5,400 riders, 9.2 million raised. This year, I just checked on the website, we're already at 5,000 registered with 6 weeks to go. There's typically quite a rush at the end. I'd be surprised if we don't end up with more like 6,000 riders this year, and a target of 9.5 million to raise. And it looks like we're well on track to do that too. My own fundraising is proceeding apace. I'm on track for where I was last year at this point in the fundraising. So I'm getting a little more active at reaching out for the second and third time to some folks. I have a contact list of 750, 800 people that I reach out to and touch, either email contacts or LinkedIn contacts or Facebook contacts, some text messaging, like I said, about 800. Last year, I had 120 donors, which is, I think, a fantastic show of support from my friends, family, and former coworkers. And they raised, sorry, $13,600 last year. My goal this year is 15,000, and I'm sitting at 6,600 this morning.
As I recall, the MS Society has actually encouraged you to increase your level each, not maybe each year, but certainly since I've known you. Is that something that's continued apace?
They haven't said so directly, but yeah, that's as the numbers have declined in numbers of riders. It's obviously, if we're going to keep the fundraising going at the rate that it was, everybody needs to step up and try to raise more money. So that was an official target last year. As they got in about this time frame, they were looking at receipts and commitments and deciding that they needed to ask everybody to step up. And so I did that last year and easily achieved the 10% increase they asked for.
Could you tell us your training routine?
Yeah, so I ride year round. Last year, about 2,000 miles here in the hill country on our lovely roads with our very considerate drivers around here. It's an easy place to train compared to Houston, which is where I used to try to stay in shape. 40 to 60 miles a week. At this time of year, I'll try to start ramping to more like 70 or 80 miles a week to just be ready. I find that if I manage my pace, that sort of training pace is fine for me. I'm not trying to win anything other than fundraising awards these days. I don't care about how long it takes me to get there.
Do you have a sort of ideal distance for your training rides, or do you vary it?
I've got some variation. I've got an easy 20-mile route that leaves and finishes at my house, which is my favorite kind of ride, right? I don't have to go pack up my bike and take it someplace and wait for some other people to show up and go. So I can go and return at my own leisure. There's some modifications on that route that easily get me up to about 30 miles. And then if I want more mileage, I'll finish and then go back and loop back. I can do 2 loops if that's what I want to do and have a 60-mile ride, which is plenty. If I get to the week before the event and I've finished that week with 75 or 80 miles of riding at a reasonable pace, I'll be fine.
Where can people go to find out more information about the MS 150?
Yeah, so I'll send you a link, as I always do, with, of course, my fundraising connection, which is the most important thing to me. But ms.org is the place to go.
And they'll have information on the 150
Yes,
in there.
yes.
And we're absolutely going to put your link on, and I would encourage all of our listeners to donate. I've ridden in this event many times. It's a ton of fun.
Oh, it really is.
A lot of work, but the cause is unmatched.
I can't tell you no, I don't need to tell you what it feels like to get to the end of that thing surrounded by a bunch of folks that have all tried to do good for a weekend. It's a really good feeling.
Tell us a little bit about LaGrange, because I thought that was as special in many ways as the end.
Oh yeah, it's a great big party for a bunch of folks who really are trying to find a way to get to bed by 7:30 p.m. Everybody's exhausted, but it's there at the fairgrounds. Finishes, depending on the weather and your level of fitness, between say noon and 6:30, 7 o'clock, maybe 8 o'clock. They'll sweep the course at some point. I don't know precisely when that is, and bring people in buses if they have to. But there's, I don't know, 100 tents that are big tents. They also set up pump tents on the baseball field now, and they'll rent you a single tent if that's what you need. There's, as I mentioned before, the shower trucks that they, I think, have developed for mobile deployments of military folks generally. So a nice hot shower with a line to get to it typically. But then a chicken dinner provided by I guess it's the Knights of Columbus out of LaGrange. Lots and lots of community support. They really love that event in LaGrange. There's lots of people lining the road, if you'll recall, as you come into town. Probably the last 3 miles of a ride, there's cars and people and signs and waving. There's usually a band, which I typically avoid as I'm generally getting a massage by then. A lot of the team tents, you'll have a catered meal. I ride with Team HP. I retired from Hewlett Packard, and they allow me to continue to sleep in their tent. but we have food and massage therapists available to us, and a nice facility with some 60 or 70 people that are all on the same team. I don't see them regularly, but once a year we get together and talk old times, and that's a lot of fun too.
I also remember a fair number of people with MS who would line the route.
Oh yeah.
And I remember there was a guy in Belleville, and I watched him over the years and went from standing to sitting to the wheelchair as the disease progressed. But he was out there every year saying thank you.
Lots
Tell-
of folks along the route doing the same thing. Some of the ranches along the road. I remember the one place on the ride, maybe halfway to Belleville, where there's a guy fiddling on a stand out there in front of his ranch, and his family. I forget whether it's his mom or his dad that has MS, a wheelchair out there, and a big gathering of family for them. But yeah, lots of those kinds of things. Fayetteville goes crazy for the ride coming through. They're
Right.
really supportive and excited. They've got generally a bubble machine sending bubbles across the route. But I don't know what the population of Fayetteville is, but I think every one of them's on the side of the road watching people come by that day. It's really fun.
Alan, I wanted to thank you again. And could you tell us, if you know it, the link for donations for you?
I really don't have it committed to memory.
Okay.
I will certainly send it to you.
We'll definitely have that in the show notes. Good luck this year. Thanks for riding. And I look forward to visiting with you about this next year.
Thanks, Tom.